as I've been spending more time in the country, and it is a pretty bleak spot up here where I am, it's been fascinating to see nature, and whether I like it or not, we are actually communicating with nature. And one of the situations I've had is with a couple of magpies that they know me now and they don't run away. And not that I feed them or anything like that, but they just don't panic. And then I go down to the bottom paddock near the dam, and there's a big tree there. And one day there was a bird there. I couldn't see, it looked like a crow or something, but it was just sitting there, and I looked at it and it just gave me a squawk. And that squawk, for some reason, said to me, give this bird some space. I think the bird was on the way out, and I just thought, well, gee, that's amazing. And sometimes with the alpacas here, they know you're coming before you feed them, as do a lot of our pets. So we're learning gradually to communicate with nature as best we can. Now, today, the power of the month of May, which is the last week of May for us, and I'm not going to talk about that. I just missed out on a scoop headline. The order or disorder is the name of the title today, but I could have called it May or Mayhem. But order is the order of the day for the power of September. Now, if you're asking me why I'm doing that, well, I'm rebelling. I'm rebelling against having set structures. They've been good for us and we'll be continuing to use them. You know, the 12 powers, one for each month. Why does it have to be that month? And quite often I look at the daily word, which I've got here, and I think, yeah, that is so appropriate. But then I might look back or look forward and see, well, that one is more appropriate for me. And that's a big step for me because, you know, I seem to think, well, I'll go along with the flow and see. Now, today one is, which was read beautifully by Diane, is comfort. Well, I don't necessarily want too much comfort today because I've got things to do. So I've looked at the one we had for yesterday, which was joy. So see how it all works. We become more independent. We've got Mother's Day, Father's Day, Christmas, New Year. Christmas, you can feel like Christmas any time of the year. It's a state of consciousness, and it's a form of enlightenment when you can do that. Now, symbols and all that sort of stuff is a good way for us to start on the road to some sort of order in our spiritual lives, because we need it. We need physical order, we need spiritual order, we need nutritional order if we want to look after the most precious asset we've got, which is our body temple. And we need emotional maturity as well as we go on. That's a big ask. Now, a symbol, whether it be, say, a statue, we've talked about this, I've talked about this before, statue, an icon, and this place is full of interesting symbols in this old church here. Old Protestant, there's a window out the back that's still got the stained glass. And I've got statues that I used to collect when I was younger of Jesus and Mary and Kuan Yin, the goddess of mercy, of Bodhisattva. They're all in there, but they're all in the garage at the moment. But these icons and symbols can help us. Even Jesus is a symbol. And in unity, in our metaphysical way of looking at things, we see Jesus as representing our I am presence. Jesus doesn't want us to worship him. He wants us to do as he did. And that's not an easy discussion with people when they ask you about unity. There's a lot you have to cover. And usually every week I get something. I had one last week when I was in the takeaway, and they seem to think that I live in this church, and gradually it's get to know that I am a minister. And they say, look, I don't believe this, that, and the other thing. How could God let this happen and God let that happen? And I said to this guy, God didn't. It's us. We let it happen. And I thought, oh, this is good. How am I going to get out of this? And he said, oh, I think God's a terrible person. I said, so you think God is a person? Anyway, I'm not giving up on this chap. I've got a little book that I'm going to give him. And some of you may know it. There was a character called Stuart Wilde about 20 or 30 years ago. He was a metaphysical writer. He was an amazing guy. And funny enough, we were both born on the 20th of December, which is a worry. And his sense of humor was just so wonderful. And he talks about the force. So I'm going to give this person, I've got 3 copies of this book. So I'm going to give this person a copy of this book, The Force, and see where we go from there. I mentioned that the fact that I'm using the power of order because I need it. We all need it, but especially now since I've had a month off, and really the time has gone so quick. That month off has been very interesting. I've been out of the routine, and I've found that I've gone into my library and thought, my goodness, what treasures I have found. And a lot of the treasures I'm going to pass on, but no one seems to want books anymore. And I had a look at my 40 years or more than that of teaching music. And I've got them there, the Beethoven sonatas, the Bach preludes and fugues. They're all, everything's there. I've got 3 copies of a lot of them, and they cost a fortune in the early days. I said to my friend David in Dalesford, you know, would any of your students like some of my music? He said, no. He said, because you don't need music anymore. You just go online and buy what you want and download it. Whereas before, when we were learning music, we were encouraged to not just buy one sonata, but have the whole volume there and play the rest of them through in our own time. So that's something different, a culture shock for me, as I've noticed. But I've still got it myself here. I haven't given up. And other people have given me songs like some of the old time sheet music. No one wants that anymore, but I've got a little plan for that too. So times have changed with that sort of thing. Order. Order is a mind power. And Charles Fillmore wrote in his book, The Mysteries of Genesis, order is the first law of the universe. Well, that's for sure. Indeed, there'll be no universe if there wasn't order. If things weren't in harmony, the cosmos would be chaos. We take it for granted that the sun will rise in the morning and the moon rise serenely at night. We just take all this for granted, but the intelligence behind it, it's humble to know that we are that intelligence in action. We are individual expressions of that divine order. And it's humbling to know, though, that we didn't invent it. Something even higher than us has invented that order, which I'll talk about soon. Just as order is heaven's first law, it is also the earth's first law. Playwright Henry Miller states, the world is not to be put in order. The world is order incarnate. And it's up to us to harmonize with that order. We read early in Genesis where God had produced everything, and he looked around, see how the old things still sit there, it, or he or she, it, I'm usually pretty safe with. It looked around and said, great, everything's fine. And then it created us. And look what happened. Take dominion, we're told. So we did. And we've taken dominion over millennia and millennia. And I think one lesson is finally coming home to us, that whatever we do and however we experiment with this power, we have to use it in order. Otherwise, the old saying, one goes, we all go. Haven't we learnt that lesson in the last 4 years? We are not individuals. We are all in it together, individually together, but we all have to think of one another and serve one another. And it's been amazing how we've seen those people that serve, and we're so grateful for them ever so often when we look around in the supermarket or anywhere else where someone, a doctor, or people on the street, and we've got people that I know now that are collecting stuff for the homeless. We used to do that, and we'll be doing it again soon. But I know someone that's prepared 50 packs, and they're going on the streets of Melbourne to present these packs to these people. So that's a chain in the link of us all being together. I've mentioned before a book by Deepak Chopra called We Are the Future of God, and we are when we think about it. We can take things higher together. And we're seeing the most wonderful example of that where we are now, because isn't it amazing that we all learned about Zoom before we were shut down? This has kept us going. Spirit, one step ahead of us. Thank you, God. Now, well, as I said, we're all in this together and we're all learning how to do it. And I think our metaphysical group has been amazing, and all the other metaphysical groups in the International New Thought movement. And not only that, all the other groups that are around. We've been featuring the Indigenous groups today. Well, there's the Toltecs, and there's the Indian wisdom, Native American Indian wisdom. It's all the same according to the culture of the time. And I'm just enjoying it so much that all these cultures are coming together, and we're seeing the basis of all these different cultures boiled down to the common element of do unto others as we would be done by. We teach affirmations, denials, meditation, contemplation, and many other spiritual tools that we can use. And they work. But there comes a time when we have to stand under our own wood-eye tree. And that's what we learn to do and not worry about it. That's why I'm feeling a bit rebellious lately with what I want to do at a certain time. Do I need to sit upright, cross-legged to meditate? Maybe not. Can we do it in bed? Yes, we don't fall asleep. And I see there's a big statue of Buddha in, I think it's in Thailand, called the Sleeping Buddha, where Buddha is meditating, lying on a couch. That's more my style at the moment, especially when we have that time in the morning where we're in that twilight zone. We're nice and warm in bed. If we can, be conscious of what we're doing and then go into our meditation. Order is also an emotional quality. Outer order, accomplished by the dominion of one person over the other, is not order, it's tyranny. And it can contribute to ill health amongst people. We're looking at the disastrous effects of social media. It's really shocking what you see at the moment, what we all see. Most of us here didn't have that when we were young, but we all know what it's like when things don't go well for us, or we all make mistakes, but my goodness, they're blown up out of proportion now on silent media with people so-and-so calling out so-and-so, or someone shut down over something. It's a whole new terminology. So we've got to be careful, because the overbalanced symptoms of order, like being a perfectionist, or the letter of the law, not the spirit of the law. Of course, underbalanced symbols of order are just as bad, like procrastination. Always late and always unorganized. And that's where I caught myself over these holidays, just getting back into some order. Now, sometimes it's easier than others to be ordered. You can't be bothered sometimes. You might have had a good meal, but you think, oh, look, I'll do the washing up in the morning. And there's nothing worse than getting up in the morning, and there it is. So the author that wrote the Four Agreements, I know I talked about this before, but I just enjoy that book. He said, we can be very strong 1 minute and quite weak in the next, but as long as we do our best. The Four Agreements: be impeccable with our word. Don't take anything personally. Be skeptical, but learn to listen. And the one I'm talking about now, always do our best. Our best is going to change from moment to moment as we move through the different stages of life. And here I am in this stage of life, and what worked for me at other times doesn't necessarily work as easy now. So I have to be in order. And I get a thrill when I look at the Sunday papers or something, and there's Ron Barassi in his 80s, and a couple of the other people all jogging along, and people doing line dances and things like that in their late years. And I know some of us here love dancing. And that's why I enjoyed that first song we put up, Life is a Dance. And I think that's the legacy Tina Turner will give us. Life is a dance. And I was overjoyed to see those thousands of people in some place, I think it was in the outback Australia, all lining up doing Nutbush. It was uplifting. It really was. And to think that someone like Tina Turner, in her later years, was able to convey some of her Buddhist teachings and how she passed on her teachings to others, or let people know that she was into the Buddhist philosophy. And when you think she was 83, and what a life, and also that it worries me the sound of that music, because our endocrine system is very delicate, and those giant speakers. Well, obviously she was in the right place at the right time, and she could handle it. Her body temple could handle it. And the joy she gave the world will be with us. So I think I'm getting on a bit here, so I better move on. Now, a knowledge of divine order can make our lives now, and some now in the future, much simpler. I was told when I was young, we had a visiting yoga man from India. The first time I'd seen one, I think I was about 18, Northwest Tasmania, a very unusual sight. And so we were all lined up, I forget his name now, and he was in his robes. We all wanted to have a little talk with him. And I sat with him, and at 18, you can imagine me wanting to get into radio and being a muso, and I was here, there, and everywhere. He just looked at me and said, simplify your life. Well, that meant nothing at the time to me. What do you mean simplified? Well, I now know what it means. So one final little thing, we are basically a metaphysical new thought group, and we have done our bit for the world, and we're still doing it because the world is now accepting these teachings. It may not be in the way we know, but it'll be in a way their culture knows. We're refining it, and people are now coming down to the nitty-gritty of what a spiritual teaching is. But just for old time's sake, from the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary, I'll read the Bible quote, Matthew 5, verse 1 to 2. And Jesus, seeing the multitudes, went up a mountain, and when he was set, his disciples came unto him, and he opened his mouth and spoke. Now, this is an example, metaphysically, of how the Bible works with the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary. The multitudes. That's our endless thoughts and chatter. It can never stop sometimes. The multitudes. And we read of Jesus going into the temple with the whips, casting out these multitudes. When he was set being, he was in that sacred space, that point of light within us, where we reach that peace. The mountain. Mountain is a high state of consciousness. And his disciples, well, he aligned his 12 powers, the disciples with him. Those 12 powers, and I've said before, there may be more, but 12 is enough for me. So when he was set and the disciples were all together, from that perspective, he spoke. His inner wisdom came forth. And in our culture, which we have a lot to be grateful for as we learn about the other cultures as well, we know that we have the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary as a way to help us explain our culture to us that have been brought up as Methodists or Catholics or Presbyterians. So how do we achieve divine order? We declare it. We take dominion and declare it, just as Jesus on the Sea of Galilee calmed those waters which represent emotion. Peace, be still. But don't just whisper it, say it, and say it with feeling. So to sum up, our use of time can help us. Are we always racing against time? Do we control us, or does time control, or do we control time? A Buddhist saying is, don't look back, don't look forward, live in the moment. Not easy, because we've got to control the thoughts from here and here and here. But we know we can. We have the power to do this. So regardless of whether life is fair or unfair, we are all here for one reason, and that is to evolve and express more and more of that great spirit within us. And we can do that by being orderly in our lives. So be it. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Bill.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, everybody.